24-year-old Rebekah Gay went missing October 31st, 2012, after she never showed up for work and never called to let them know either. Everyone knew that this was completely out of character for her. Her boyfriend, who had planned to propose to her that very same day, also hadn't heard from her. Something was wrong. After calling police, they searched her home, which had her purse inside, but her phone, wallet, car keys, and her car were gone. There were also more signs inside that made it clear that something bad had happened. None of it made sense. Where was Rebekah? As police desperately searched for answers, her family and the community came together, including the town's pastor, who stood before his congregation asking them to pray for her safe return. But he knew exactly where she was. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. Thank you all so much for being here for today's video. If this is your first time here, welcome. I would love for you guys to join the familia by subscribing down below. And if you guys are a regular listener, also make sure to double check that you are subscribed down below, just so we can continue growing this community and growing our impact. I'd also like to shout out the familia members who are watching this video early before it goes live. Members get early access to all my videos, they get bonus non-true crime videos, they get behind the scenes content, they get custom wallpapers and more every single month. If you guys would like to become a member, you guys can click the join button down below. Either way, I appreciate you guys so much, and you guys are seriously the most supportive community ever. You guys just show so much empathy and so much respect with these cases, and that's just what I appreciate so much about this channel. Like, I feel like this is a good space where we can share these stories. Everyone can feel safe here, and that's just so important to me. With all of that being said, let's get into today's video. Today, we're going to be talking about what happened to 24-year-old Rebekah Jane Gay, a young mother whose life was stolen by someone who was supposed to represent faith and redemption. He pretended that religion had saved him from the person he used to be, claiming that he had changed and left behind his evil and violent past. But in the end, he betrayed everyone who believed in him and who gave him another chance. He took Rebekah away from her son, from her family, and from everyone who loved her forever. Rebekah's story is very important to share, and I will be leaving some resources down below to talk about with your loved ones about recognizing unsafe behaviors, what to do if someone makes you uncomfortable, and how to stay safe. I will also be leaving some guides on spotting red flags in adults, responding to harassment in public or at work, using the sex offender registry, and how to talk to someone if you have been sexually assaulted. Your safety and well-being always matters. That being said, let's jump right in and let's talk about what happened to Rebekah. Rebekah Jane Gay was born on March 26, 1988 to her parents Sally Jane Kelly and Thomas Benjamin Gay in Midland, Michigan. Sally and Thomas got married back in April of 1976, and they built a life centered around family, faith, and hard work. They were the kind of people who truly loved the simple life. Sally says that she loved living there because she could hobby farm and just spend her days gardening, mowing her lawn, collecting chicken eggs, and taking care of her horses and small animals, which is what brought her peace and relaxation. But more than anything, she's always been grateful for the time that she was there to spend time with her children. As for Thomas, he was a pipe fitter and welder who also enjoyed hunting and had a really big passion for horses. He coordinated equestrian fundraising events for the St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, known as St. Jude's Ride, and he was really proud of this. He was also a lifelong member of the Midland Eagles Lodge and supported causes such as the Wounded Warrior Project. Together, the two of them raised children, 2 daughters and 2 sons, and Rebekah was the youngest of the 4 children. She was the baby of the family, and her nickname was Beckaboo, which fit her perfectly because she absolutely adored Halloween. Her mom, Sally, said that this was her favorite time of the year. She loved to put out the decorations, she loved dressing up, she loved thinking about the costumes that she was going to do that year, and just the excitement of trick-or-treating. Those who knew Rebekah said that she was a very happy girl and described her as sweet, quiet, caring, beautiful, and of just having a huge smile. Her high school friends recall how much they would laugh with her, how they would love when she'd sit behind them in class and like braid their hair or play with their hair, or how she would question all of the boys, acting kind of like a big sister and teasing them about their crushes. Rebekah also had a very caring heart. She loved helping others and volunteered at school events whenever she could. While she was on the equestrian team, she helped with the archery team with fundraisers to support local families in need. After graduating from Bullock Creek High School in 2007, she decided to follow her passion for beauty. She enrolled at the In-Session Arts of Cosmetology Beauty School, and after graduating, she began working at a hair salon where she did what she loved. You know, she loved playing with people's hair in school, and I feel like that passion led into her career, and she just enjoyed styling people, giving them the haircut that they wanted, and just making people feel special and feel beautiful. It was actually around this time that Rebekah and her then boyfriend, Chad, learned that they were going to have a son. Although their romantic relationship did not continue, they were on very good co-parenting terms and made things work for the sake of their new baby, who was born in 2009 and whom they named Conway Cliff Kelly. Rebekah and Chad would take turns caring for Conway, and they had a very cordial relationship. She would drop him off whenever it was his day to spend time with the son, then pick him up, and they would just kind of repeat the cycle. Now, Conway did spend most of his time with Rebekah though, and he was the center of her universe. Everything that she did, every single plan that she made, every decision that she made revolved around giving him the best life possible. She balanced being a young mom while also working and continuing to build her own future. She would read to him a lot at night, specifically Bible stories, and they slept in the same bed basically every single night, so they were just super close. And Conway loved his mom so much. Eventually, Rebekah left her job at the hair salon and she began working at a Goodwill store in Mount Pleasant. She also moved to Broomfield Valley Mobile Home Park in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, where her mom was actually already living there, so now she was going to be closer to her mom, which also meant that she would have more help with Conway. And she just really liked the people that she was renting from. She liked the area that she lived in. One, because again, she was close to her mom, but she was also happy to now have like her own place, somewhere that she could raise her son and just make a home for her little family. Now, apart from work and caring for her son, Rebekah had also been in a relationship for the past 2 years with a man that she just absolutely adored. A man named Aaron Quinn. They were absolutely in love, and Aaron also formed a beautiful bond with Conway. Rebekah only wanted positive influences around her son, so she couldn't have asked for a better partner. She was so happy with him, and she didn't know that Aaron had actually purchased an engagement ring for her because he knew what he wanted, and that was a future with Rebekah for the rest of his life. All of this brings us to the end of October 2012. Rebekah and Aaron were excited because it was going to be Halloween soon, and as I said, Rebekah absolutely adored Halloween. They were so excited to celebrate this holiday together, and they were excited because they were going to take Conway, who was now 3 years old, trick-or-treating. She loved Halloween, but now that she got to spend it with her son and with the love of her life, Aaron, it just made this holiday even more special. And she also had no idea that Aaron was actually planning on proposing to her on Halloween. So it was going to be an amazing night. She was already super excited because she had recently been given a store leader position at Goodwill, so she was working the day shifts at the store now, which meant that she had the afternoons free to spend time with Conway and with Aaron. Rebekah's manager, who also happened to be Aaron's sister, Andrea, remembers how excited she was for this holiday. They had gotten a shipment of Halloween stuff for the store, and part of this shipment was like all of these scarecrows. So Rebekah saw them as she was unpacking it for work, and she's like, oh my gosh, like this would be perfect for my front yard. So she bought around 8 of these scarecrows and she put them up all over her yard. She also decorated her home with other Halloween decorations like spiders, spider webs, and just like the other typical Halloween decorations, just to really embrace this holiday. So yeah, as you can see, she just absolutely adored Halloween and was so excited. Now let's move up to the night before Halloween, and this is when Rebekah was chatting a bit with her mom. Sally remembers how Rebekah sounded so happy on the phone, especially because she had just signed up for college to continue her education. They spoke about, what college was going to be like, and then Rebekah told her good night and that she would see her tomorrow and that she loved her. She also spoke to her boyfriend Aaron that night, and that was basically it. She did all the phone calls she needed to do, and then she went to bed, excited for the next day. The following morning, on Wednesday, October 31st, 2012, Rebekah was scheduled to show up for work at 8 a.m., but 8 a.m. came and went, and she never showed up. She hadn't called, she hadn't texted, and she just never arrived for her shift. The assistant store manager called the store's manager, Andrea, and told her that she just never showed up and that no one could get in contact with her. Right away, Andrea just knew that something was wrong. Rebekah was basically never late. The few times that she was late, she would call to let them know. Even if it was just like 5 minutes behind, she would call to let them know. So the fact that she hadn't called anyone to let them know that she was either running late or just wasn't going to make the shift at all was extremely alarming. Andrea was immediately thinking that something bad must have happened for, again, her not to even call. So then she starts to call Rebekah, she starts to text Rebekah, but she also gets no answers. So then she calls Aaron, who again is her cousin. But that's when she learns that he also hadn't heard from her. Andrea then calls calls back the store's assistant manager and asks if he and some of the other coworkers could actually go to Rebekah's house just to check up on her. The assistant manager was like, I mean, yeah, I can go do that, but we don't really know where she lives. So Andrea was like, okay, hold on, let me go look for the address. But you know what, just go to this, mobile home community and just look for the house with all the scarecrows in the front yard. And with that, he was actually able to locate Rebekah's home among all the other houses in this mobile home park. So once they arrived, the assistant manager tried opening Rebekah's door, but it was locked. They saw no sign of her and her car wasn't there either. So they were thinking, okay, maybe she's on her way to work now after waking up late or driving somewhere else, or who knows, but they saw absolutely no sign of Rebekah there. So as the assistant manager and the other coworkers were leaving and heading out of the mobile home park, they noticed something. It was Rebekah's car parked at a bar near the mobile homes. In fact, you could even see her car from her house. So the coworkers are like, oh my gosh, that's her car. They make their way to her car since, again, it was super close. And that's when they see her empty car backed up into some pine trees in the parking lot. It was parked in a way that wasn't really normal, as if whoever parked it there didn't want this car to be found very easily. Most people don't back up their cars into trees, and that's how her car was, so it just really stood out. So her coworkers are like, okay, here's her car. It's parked really weird. This is very suspicious. And they go inside the bar, which was actually called the Barn Door, and they asked the owner if they knew what happened to the car or if they had seen Rebekah. The owner said no, but they just so happened to be related to Rebekah's landlord. So they called the landlord to come over and have them unlock her house just so that they could go inside and check up on her. The coworkers went back to the house, and when they finally got inside, they realized that it was empty. She wasn't there. But what they did find was her purse in the kitchen, which was odd. Even more odd, her phone, her wallet, and her car keys were missing. When they told Andrea about this, she said that her brother had given Rebekah that purse back in August and that she just never went anywhere without her purse. She loved it so much that even 3 months after being gifted it, she could not stop talking about this bag. So again, the fact that she just left it there, it just meant that something was wrong. She wasn't at work where she was supposed to be. She wasn't driving to work, running late, and she wasn't at home. But her car and her purse were there. After hearing this, Andrea raced to Rebekah's house while the coworkers who were already there called the police. Shortly after the police arrived, Rebekah's mom, Sally, also arrived at the house and saw all of the cop cars and all of the officers just standing there, and she just knew that something was terribly wrong. Detective Sergeant with the Isabella County Sheriff's Department, David Patterson, began questioning everyone, and he kept hearing the same thing over and over again, that this was not like Rebekah, that this wasn't a normal situation. She, again, always answered her phone. She always kept people posted about what was going on. She always showed up for work, and she wouldn't just leave her car parked at the bar nearby. It made no sense to everyone. So Sergeant Patterson is like, okay, let's take this into account. They spoke with all of the employees from the bar, and they told him that the car wasn't there when they closed up for the night. So that meant that her car must have been dropped off there afterwards. Now, this raised further suspicions for Sergeant Patterson, but even then, investigators still told Rebekah's family and friends that they were going to have to wait until 4:30 p.m. to officially consider her as a missing person. Why until then, though? Why couldn't they begin looking for her immediately? Well, because at 4:30 p.m. was when Rebekah was supposed to go pick up Conway from Chad at the nearby Meyer parking lot to take him trick-or-treating. So they were like, if Rebekah does not show up to pick up her own son or contact Chad about her not being able to pick him up or something happening, that is when police could officially consider her a missing person. So while they waited for 4:30 p.m. to roll around, Rebekah's friends and families were working to get the word out about her disappearance. They asked everyone to share her picture and just keep an eye out for her, hoping that someone might spot her walking somewhere or, something. Rebekah had 3 tattoos that could help identify her, which they made sure to emphasize in the flyers. They were a circle of eagle feathers on her upper back, the word kiss on her hip, and a music clef with the name of her son on her left wrist. Her loved ones were literally begging for everyone to look for her and to spread the word. They were also praying a lot for her to be found and for her to have a safe return. They just prayed and prayed that she would show up at 4:30 p.m. to pick up her son. Now, hoping to see her at any of these locations and to keep an eye on any movement there, police stationed officers at Rebekah's home, where her car was found, and at the meeting point where she was scheduled to pick up her son. Unfortunately, though, 4:30 p.m. came and Rebekah never showed up to pick Conway up, and she didn't show up at her house or to get her car either. Now, investigators knew for sure that they had a big problem, and Rebekah was officially considered a missing person. Andrea vividly remembers what happened after this. The officers' radios were going off with the orders to open up her car, go into her house, and search. It didn't feel real. As investigators walked through her mobile home, one of them noticed something unusual on the carpet. There was a spot that looked like someone had kind of like scrubbed it, and they were dark stains. They kept looking around, and that's when they found a dent/crack in the wall. They found blood stains on other things in the house, and things just looked out of order. Between that and the carpet, it became clear that some kind of struggle had happened inside the home. Something bad had taken place there. Now, moving on to the car. When they examined it initially, nothing really seemed out of place at first glance, but then they noticed that the driver's seat was pushed all the way back. Now, Rebekah was petite, she was very small, so the seat should have been much closer to the steering wheel. That detail didn't fit, and it became another major red flag for investigators. Deputies also started canvassing the area. They started knocking on doors and asking if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual. And as with most missing person cases, investigators had to start with the people closest to Rebekah. That meant looking at her boyfriend first. When police spoke with Aaron, it was immediately clear how distraught he was. Now, the last time that he had heard from Rebekah was the night before when she told him that she was going to head to bed. The next morning, he texted her, and yeah, he did notice something strange. Her iPhone messages suddenly turned from blue to green, which usually means that the phone is off or out of service. It was like strange enough that he made like a mental note of it, and as the hours went by with no response, his worry only grew stronger. As they were talking to Aaron, investigators could honestly just see how much he loved her and how scared he was. There was no doubt in their minds that this was a real concern. He wasn't faking it, and as they really had nothing else on him, he was quickly cleared from the investigation. With Aaron now ruled out, detectives had to turn their attention to Chad, Rebekah's ex-boyfriend and the father of her son, Conway. They had to consider every angle, Maybe Chad was upset that Rebekah had moved on. Maybe he didn't like Aaron, or maybe they had gotten into some type of argument over Conway or over something else. So the police needed to speak to him right away. When Detective Sergeant Gary Green questioned Chad, he explained that there was just like no problems between them. He said that they were really good co-parents, that they were doing this well, and that he had no idea where Rebekah might be. He seemed frustrated with the questioning. He told detectives that he felt like his time would be better spent outside actually looking for Rebekah. So to ease the tension, Sergeant Gary Green shifted the conversation and asked him to walk them through the usual exchange routine for Conway. Chad said that they normally met at the Meyer grocery store parking lot for drop-offs and pickups. He explained that on Wednesdays, like that Halloween morning, it was pretty routine for Rebekah to have someone from her family drop Conway off in the morning since, again, she worked early morning. And then she would meet Chad later there in the afternoon to pick up their son. That Wednesday was no different. He said that Rebekah's stepfather, John, dropped Conway off at the Meyer parking lot, and that was that. He was on time, and everything seemed completely normal. Now, John was Rebekah's stepfather figure at that point, having been in a relationship with her mother, Sally, for 6 years, but he was actually officially going to be a part of the family because he and Sally had recently gotten engaged. So, even though they weren't like legally married, John was still considered, her stepfather. So, John had to have gone over to Rebekah's house to pick Conway up that morning and then dropped him off to meet Chad, meaning that he was likely one of the very last people to have seen Rebekah before she disappeared. Now, investigators began to shift their focus towards him and see what he had to say. They went to go question John, and John said that yes, he went over to Rebekah's home that morning, and when he arrived, the porch light was on, and from the light inside the bathroom, he could tell that Rebekah was awake. So he walked into the home, called out to let her know that he was there, and according to him, Rebekah answered from the bathroom, telling him that he could just hang out on the couch until it was time to get Conway up and get ready for the day. She even mentioned to him that there was a throw blanket on the couch that he could use if he wanted to relax for a bit, and John told investigators that he didn't actually see Rebekah that morning or even see her leave the house. He just heard her speaking through the bathroom, and he did what she said. He went on the couch, he fell asleep when she left the house, but he claimed that he last heard her when she was telling him all of that at around 6:30 a.m. He told investigators that he believed he heard her say goodbye and to tell him to turn the heat off before leaving, but he wasn't sure if he actually heard that, and then afterwards he just fell back asleep. Then at around 8 in the morning, he says that Conway woke him up. John said that he got Conway ready for the day. He put him in his Spider-Man costume for Halloween, and at around 8:30 in the morning, he took him to the parking lot and handed him over to Chad. Now, as investigators were speaking to John, they noticed something that caught their attention. He had a small cut on his nose and several scratches on his hands. When they asked him about it, John explained that the day before, he had been working in his home when a shelf fell and hit him in the face. So detectives go over to his house, they go to check, and sure enough, the shelf was there. And his story seemed plausible at the time. So investigators at this point had no true leads. The only thing anyone knew was that John was the last person to see Rebekah, but again, not really, because he said that all he did was hear her, speaking from the bathroom. But still, John said that he was extremely worried about where she was or what had happened to her. He called all the congregants at the church and asked them to get together to pray for Rebekah's safe return. And he was just so worried for her well-being and for Sally, of course, who was so distraught about her daughter's disappearance. So it seemed like John had nothing to do with her disappearance, but investigators explained to him that it was part of their job to rule people out so that they could keep moving the investigation forward. So Sergeant Patterson told him, you're gonna have to take a polygraph test, but John immediately said that he didn't want to. Sally, who was his fiance, trusted him completely and told him that if he had nothing to hide, he should just take the polygraph test so that they can clear him and just move on. After she talked to him for a while about this, John finally agreed to go with the investigators to take the test. Now, the test was like an hour away in Lansing, Michigan, so they're like, okay, let's get in the car, let's go to Lansing, Michigan, and throughout the hour drive, Sergeant Patterson tried to, build some rapport with him. He wanted John to feel comfortable enough to, open up. So they talked about John's family, his time in the military, and about his childhood. Sergeant Patterson asked him, simple, casual questions. Things like, what was it like growing up? As a way, again, to get John talking and to see what kind of person he really was. During the drive, John did start opening up a bit more. He admitted that he was actually very nervous about taking the polygraph test because of the fact that he had a criminal past. And he knew that people would suspect he had something to do with Rebekah's disappearance because of it. Sergeant Patterson reassured him, saying that if he hadn't truly done anything wrong, the test would simply help clear his name and it'd be better for him anyways. So by this point, the hour passes, they finally arrive to where this polygraph test is going to be taking place. Now, while John is being questioned during the polygraph exam, investigators back in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, actually made a huge discovery outside of his home. In the bed of John's navy blue Dodge pickup truck, they found a necklace and some blood. The necklace was still clasped, but it was broken right in the middle as if it had been ripped off someone by force. At this point, things weren't looking good for John. Again, he was the last person to see Rebekah. He had scratches on his nose and on his hands. He initially refused to take a polygraph test, and now, with these findings in his truck, things kept pointing to him having to do something with Rebekah's disappearance. So they immediately got to work on getting a search warrant for his truck and for his home. Back in Lansing, Michigan, where the polygraph test was going on, investigators were still questioning him and still conducting this test. And in the end, John failed it, which was another major red flag. So while investigators were still in Mount Pleasant, working on the search warrants, Sergeant Patterson interrogated John. At this point, it was now 3 o'clock in the morning, and John repeated the same story that he had told earlier, that he didn't know what happened to Rebekah. When Sergeant Patterson asked him what he thought maybe happened to her, what his theory was, he said that he believed that Rebekah had been abducted. Sergeant Patterson then challenged him, asking why her car would then be parked at the barn door bar, so close to her home. That didn't really make any sense. And John didn't really have an answer to this. Then Sergeant Patterson showed him the photos that they had just discovered in the bed of his pickup truck, the blood and the necklace, and asked, what do you think these are? Like, why would these be in your car? John looked at the pictures and admitted that, yes, this was his truck. And then acting very confused, he said, I don't really know. I guess that kind of looks like blood. So this is crazy. While Sergeant Patterson is interrogating him, investigators are back in, where everything is going on, learning more about John's past, specifically about his criminal background, which again, he briefly mentioned earlier. So before we get further into the investigation, let's talk about who John was and what investigators found out about his past. Let's start at the very beginning, and then we'll get into his criminal background. John Douglas White was born on May 20th, 1957. He had one sister named Christina, whom he was extremely close to. They both grew up in Augusta, Michigan, and Christina really looked up to her brother. She wanted to do everything that he did. She wanted to play baseball like him, kickball, hide and seek, and all of that. They had what you would consider, a pretty normal childhood. Their dad was a respected man in their small town. He was the police chief, the fire chief, and even the mayor. So everyone knew about the White family. Their parents raised John and Christina to always be truthful, but John actually struggled with that. He lied about school, about homework, and about little things that didn't even matter. together. And whenever he got caught, there was always some elaborate story and excuse behind it. Christina said that John never really took responsibility for anything. Their dad, who again always pushed for the truth, would take John into his bedroom, close the door, and tell him to just tell the truth, to just confess to everything that he had done. If he kept lying, he would get a spanking until he finally admitted what he had done. Every time this would happen, Christina said that she would actually cry. She said that it hurt her more than it seemed to hurt him. John just never really showed any emotion. He didn't cry, he didn't apologize for lying or for his behavior. He also got in a lot of trouble quite a bit for his mouth. Christina remembered one story from high school when John and one of his friends thought it would be funny to run into the girls' locker room yelling, "I need a maxi pad." They bragged about it later, laughing like it was like the funniest thing in the world when it's not. When they got home, they told Christina, who just shook her head and warned that one day he would get in real trouble for doing stuff like that. But John honestly just brushed it off, saying that he was just having fun. That was something that he said a lot, no matter what he did, it was always just a joke, it was always just for fun, and it was never his fault. But other than that, she and John did have, genuine fun together sometimes. Their bedrooms were right next to each other, and at night after their parents went to bed, they would, sneak into each other's room, they would play games, they would throw stuffed animals back and forth through their doorways, laughing super quietly so that they wouldn't get in trouble. This was like their thing, But one night, things changed. Christina threw a stuffed animal into John's room like usual, but he didn't throw it back. She tried again, but nothing. She tossed another stuffed animal and still she got no response. Then suddenly, John came into her room, looked at her and said, "If you throw anything else, I'm going to kill you." Christina just froze at this point. That didn't sound like her brother at all. His tone was dark, almost empty, and it really frightened her. She quietly got back into bed and he turned around, walked out of the room, and that was it. At the time, she brushed it off, thinking maybe he was just in a bad mood that night, but still it was scary. After John graduated from high school, he joined the Navy and spent about 2 years stationed in Japan. When he came back, he told Christina all kinds of wild stories from his time overseas. One story in particular, though, stuck with her. He said that he met a woman at a bar, brought her back to his hotel, and when she went into the bathroom and came back out, he realized she was actually a man. John said he'd, quote, totally freaked out and beat the hell out of them. He told the story like it was some big joke, even acting it out and making everyone laugh. The guys around him, like his friend, thought that this was like hilarious, but obviously Christina didn't. Something about the way he said this so casually just made her feel so uneasy. Now, she never knew if this story was true or not, or just another one of his like exaggerated stories, but it was really the first time that she ever heard him talk about being truly violent towards someone else and feeling proud about it. And this wouldn't be the last time he would say something like this. After he got out of the Navy, he began smoking marijuana along with doing other drugs and even started selling them. He eventually seemed to settle down into a normal life when he married one of Christina's close friends from high school named Dawn in October of 1977. He was 20 years old at the time and Dawn was 17 years old. She actually became pregnant shortly after and was now living in Battle Creek, Michigan. There were a lot of ups and downs in their relationship, but to Christina, John seemed like a devoted husband and a devoted father. She thought maybe the structure of family life had kind of grounded him and like calmed him down from like his really insane behavior, and that maybe he was finally happy now. However, one day in March of 1980, when John was 22 years old, everything just completely changed. Christina was at home watching the news when she suddenly heard her brother's name. The news anchor said John White had been arrested for stabbing a 17-year-old girl named Teresa Morris multiple times. Christina froze. She couldn't believe what she was hearing on the news. Then John's wife called her. She explained that John and Teresa had been downstairs smoking pot together and that out of nowhere, John ran upstairs screaming that he had killed her and to call the police. Christina's heart sank when she heard this. She needed to see her brother for herself, so she went straight to the prison to go visit him. When she saw him, she noticed cuts near his thumbs and asked him, how he got this. John told his sister that Teresa had come at him with a knife, that they had been doing drugs, and she suddenly attacked him because she wanted his stash. He said that he just blacked out after this, and when he came to, she was lying on the floor bleeding. So he insisted that this entire thing was self-defense. Now, Christina remembered thinking the cuts on his hands did look like the kind you get when you're trying to block a knife. So she wanted to believe that it was, a horrible accident, that this was self-defense. However, during the trial, she heard Teresa's version of what happened. Teresa was just a normal teenager attending Battle Creek Central High School who hung out with her friends, studied, and did normal teen things. She just happened to live near John and she she met him by mistake. She accidentally went to the wrong house while looking for a friend and ended up at his place, a house that has since been demolished. She said that at first he seemed normal, like nothing was off about him, but then he invited her over to see a stock car racetrack set up in his basement. She said that she hesitated with this invitation, but eventually accepted. This was all at around 5 p.m. And once she was downstairs in his basement, something immediately felt wrong. The basement was empty, quiet, and cold. She remembers feeling a pit in her stomach, and something told her that she needed to get out ASAP. So she turned to head for the stairs, but before she could reach them, John came up behind her and stabbed her with a knife just under her right shoulder blade. Teresa said that she screamed and tried to push him off, but he began stabbing her in the abdomen and all over her body as she screamed and begged for him to stop and to just let her go. She remembers that there was just blood everywhere. He stabbed her a total of 15 times, 6.5 inches deep each time. She still has the scars to this day. Teresa said that everything felt like it was happening in slow motion and said that John's face was of pure pleasure the entire time. She also remembers him grabbing her by the hair as he was stabbing her and telling her, "This isn't my first time, just shut up. You're making this more difficult than it has to be." He was also calling her his wife's name and standing over her asking, "Why aren't you dead yet?" As she was lying there bleeding, he also said to her, "It's okay, you're nothing but a woman." Teresa said that she was just absolutely terrified and that he also told her, "You're gonna be a really nice piece of meat. If I can't have you, I'm sure as hell not gonna let anybody else have you." She kept pleading with him not to kill her, but he just didn't stop. He lifted the knife again, and in that moment she realized what was about to happen, so she thought, "He's going to cut my throat." That's when she put her head down and prayed that this would just be over quickly. But instead of cutting her throat, he just cut her chin. Teresa again tried to stay completely still, hoping that he would think that she was dead and just leave her alone. John then kissed her, held her hand for a moment, rocked her a bit, and told her, "Shh, you're going to go now. I'm really sorry you had to go like this, but what the you're just a woman." Then John just walked out of his own basement, leaving her for dead. Teresa says that John's wife then walked in with the sheet over her face and said, "Shut up, just shut up." And Teresa started begging her for help. A visitor at the home actually heard Teresa's screams, and that's who called 911. And from there, she was taken to a hospital where she underwent surgery that saved her life. What Teresa went through was absolutely horrible. Like, just hearing that and reading that breaks your heart. I mean, she was just 17 years old and was battling this monster. In the end, John was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison for attempted murder in 1981. And while in there, he actually wrote a book about his life and even sent a copy of it to his sister Christina. And inside, there were some things that he wrote that really shocked his sister. He spoke about an incident from their childhood. When John and Christina were kids, they both had paper routes, each responsible for one side of town. One afternoon, while Christina was delivering papers, she walked up to a porch where a large dog came charging at her and knocked her to the ground until the owners eventually came out and pulled the dog off of her. She remembers crying all the way home, shaken and scared, while her parents comforted her. Even though she had some bite marks, she wasn't terribly hurt, but it really scared her. Now, John heard about what happened, but he didn't say much. He didn't seem angry or worried about Christina, which, she found strange at the time, but she also didn't think too much about it. The next day, when she went back to deliver papers, the dog that had attacked her was gone, and it stayed gone. Later, some kids at school told her that the owners had found the dog shot dead in the woods. It was a hunting town, and that kind of thing, while tragic, didn't seem impossible back then, but now when she was reading a copy of John's book, she learned the truth of what happened to that dog. He wrote in the book that he had actually shot the dog after it attacked her. He described how he got down on his belly in the grass with a shotgun, waited for the dog to come out into the open, and then just pulled the trigger. Christina, as an adult, is now reading this and she's just in complete shock. I mean, he never said anything about the dog, not back then, not ever. That was the moment that she learned that something was deeply off about his sense of right and his sense of wrong. I can't imagine learning that about your own brother, but maybe he had learned his lesson, serving his time in prison though. So, he spent his time in prison, but later appealed his case and won, arguing that his attorney had failed to pursue an insanity defense since he claimed to have suffered from partial amnesia. His lawyer didn't ask for a mental health exam that could have helped him prove he wasn't mentally stable during the attack because his dad didn't want to pay for it, which could have cost around $1,000. And to the court, it was unfair that he wasn't given proper defense since his attorney attorney was listening to John's father rather than to their client. So in the end, instead of being given a new trial, he was let out on 2 years of probation in 1983, ordered to undergo mental health treatment, and was prohibited contact with Teresa. That's it. He only served 2 years for what he did to her. And on top of that, Teresa had no idea that he had been released because no one told her. This was years before the Victims' Right Act existed, which is a law that, on top of other things, would have made sure that she had been notified about this. So a few years later, she was standing in line at the DMV when she suddenly recognized a voice behind her. It was John. She turned around and saw him smiling at her, right there next to her. Despite nearly killing her and brutally stabbing her, he was now walking free, standing behind her at the DMV. It was unbelievable. She grabbed one of those retractable line divider pillars and went over to hit him with it, but a security guard intervened and told her that she had to leave. Through it all, John's sister Christina said that she never once heard John apologize or really show any sign of remorse for what he had done. He never said that he was sorry. Not to Teresa, not to anyone. It's just insane that he only served 2 years for this. After being out, he became a long-haul truck driver. Christina thought that it was pretty cool that her brother got to go travel all around the country as a truck driver. He would tell her about all the places that he had seen, the highways, that he had driven, and the people that he had met. But he would also talk about the women that he met at the truck stops, the ones that he called lot lizards. He would go from truck to truck talking to the drivers. John told Christina that he never slept with any of them, but later she heard from some of his friends that he would brag about taking them into his truck, having sex with them, and then afterwards saying that he would dump them in a dumpster. He didn't say he killed them, just that he, quote, threw them away when he was done. Christina just didn't know what to believe. She told herself his friends were exaggerating or that John was just spinning another one of his wild stories like he always did. Another person to whom he would say things like this to was his fellow truck driver and friend, Frederick Nicole. Now, Frederick said that John knew, quote, all the seedy truck stops, the ones with sex workers, and would brag about knowing how to talk to them, on the radio and, get them to, go into his truck. Frederick also said John was, quote, kind of a perv and was always talking about women in disgusting ways, and that most of his stories from the Navy involved women, specifically, quote, ladies of the night. The two spent hours together on the road, and Frederick said that overall, besides being a pervert, John seemed to be like a normal person, that he seemed to be easygoing. Now, he did know about his past, but he gave him the benefit of the doubt, which is just kind of insane. But once at a way station in Ohio, John suddenly started yelling at a female Department of Transportation worker, calling her awful names after she asked him to change a flat tire. This just caught Frederick completely off guard. Yelling at someone of authority was really insane and kind of shocking. So he was like, yeah, that was strange, but at the time he didn't think much of it. Now, fast forward to 1994, John is 37 years old. He is still married with 2 kids and another baby on the way, living in a mobile home. He was also now working in maintenance at Textile Systems Inc., which was a hospital laundry facility in Kalamazoo, Michigan. There, he developed a personal relationship with his coworker, 26-year-old Vicky Sue Wall from Comstock Township, Michigan. John told Christina that he loved Vicky and that he was having an affair. He would meet Vicky at the parking lot of the local Meijer grocery store. She would get into his truck and then they would drive off somewhere private to have sex. Now, Christina told John that he needed to come clean to his wife, but he just didn't want to tell her the truth. And as usual, bad things happened when John was somehow involved. On July 15th, 1994, Vicky's family reported her as missing. Days had passed with no word from her. According to her mother, Mary, Vicky had dropped off fresh berries at her house on July 10th, one day before she disappeared. She said, quote, I tried calling her and after a few days, I got really worried. We've been out of touch for several days at a time before, but she's always been with friends. None of Vicky's friends have heard from her either. Now, when Christina heard this, when she heard that her brother's, lover was missing, she had a really bad feeling about this. She thought that maybe John was involved. 2 days after her family reported her missing, Vicky's car was found in the Meijer parking lot, abandoned. And when investigators reviewed the surveillance footage, they saw Vicky getting into a 1982 black Chevy pickup truck, pulling up right next to her car at the Meijer parking lot at around 3 a.m. on July 11th. Vicky was seen getting out of the car, and the two drove off together in her truck. But the footage never showed the truck bringing her back. Investigators asked for the public's help in locating the driver of the truck, which they described as a white male with a beard, about 6 feet tall and weighing between 140 and 150 pounds. Investigators quickly learned the truck in the video belonged to her once coworker, John. Around 2 weeks before she disappeared, she left that job, so they were co-workers at one point, but they weren't co-workers at the time that she disappeared. Regardless, the police now learned that she got into John's truck, and they also found that same truck parked in front of his trailer home, where John lived with his wife and with his children. So police questioned him, but he did not want to tell them their nature of the relationship. He didn't want to admit that he was having an affair with his co-worker Vicky. However, he did tell investigators that yes, he picked Vicky up and drove to another location. Then he dropped her off back at her car. They had a brief conversation. She got out of his truck, and that was that. But again, the surveillance footage from the parking lot never showed any of that. It showed Vicky getting into John's car and then never coming back. But, despite this, there was no other proof that John was involved in her disappearance. There was some blood in his pickup truck, which he did a pretty good job at cleaning it, but back then, a much larger amount of blood would have been needed to actually test it. So with no body and no real evidence against him, they had no choice but to let him go and continue searching for Vicky. John was suspicious though, because it was his truck in the video, and he told police that he may have harmed Vicky during one of his blackouts, which his wife Dawn also commented on, saying that yeah, John had multiple personalities that could be violent. Authorities were thinking that maybe Vicky had been pressuring John to leave his wife and to blow up this affair, and that made him angry. And the fact that the day after Vicky disappeared, he had admitted himself into the Kalamazoo Regional Psychiatric Hospital for, quote, suicidal tendencies. His wife even called Christina and told her that he came home late in the middle of the night, saying he, quote, hurt somebody and was going to take his own life. He also told this to other people, like to his friend Frederick and to another friend. John told them that he was thinking about ending his own life to spare his family the pain of another trial. He even told Frederick and the other friend that within a week, his wife would have letters to hand out explaining everything. But the next night, Frederick spotted John riding his bike on the side of the road, and the other friend told him John had said that he was on his way to end his life. When Frederick went to check on John back at his house, he was met with his wife, who asked if he was already dead, and she said that she thought that he had killed someone. Days later, when Frederick heard that Vicky was missing and that John was having an affair with her, he thought the same thing. He knew that John was behind this. Frederick had met Vicky when John showed up at his house with her, but he only introduced her as like a really good friend. So yeah, this is all really insane. The fact that Vicky went missing, was last seen getting into John's truck, but still police were thinking that they didn't have enough evidence to like go after him and arrest him or anything. It's really shocking. Police continued searching for Vicky and asking for the public's help, but it wasn't until around 2 months later that Vicky was found. A person was walking in a wooded area when he noticed 2 drag marks in the ground, and as he followed them, he saw a white tennis shoe. Then he saw a pair of women's underwear, and as he got closer, he smelled something awful. And then he saw her skull and her decomposing body with nothing but a shirt and a bra around her neck. He ran away and he called the police immediately. This was around 2 miles from the Meijer store, and her body was badly decomposed because of the summer heat. So investigators actually had to use dental records to identify her, but they were unable to determine her exact cause of death. John was finally arrested at the psychiatric hospital around a week after her body was found, and just 4 days later, after his youngest child was actually born. Christina went to go visit her brother in prison to hear his side of the story, and he told her that Vicky liked strangulation and that she liked rough sex. He said that that night, he met her at the Meijer parking lot like they always did, that he had sex with her, and after they were done, she slumped over in her seat. He said that he tried to wake her up, but that she wasn't responding, so he panicked. Instead of calling the police, he said that he dumped her body in the woods and went home to confess the affair to his wife. Christina remembers thinking to herself, like, okay, is it just one of John's many excuses and stories he always says? Like, people don't just slump over out of the blue and just die, it just wasn't really making sense, but she also tried talking herself into thinking that maybe this was an accident. However, in the back of her mind, she just knew that it wasn't. And she was right, because that story wasn't the truth. That's not what happened to Vicky whatsoever. That night, Vicky got into John's car and he punched her in the stomach as hard as he could, put a zip tie around her neck, and then drove off. He then had sex with her lifeless body and just disposed of her. It's evil, it's horrific, it's just truly horrifying and disturbing what he did to Vicky. John ended up pleading no contest to involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 8 to 15 years in prison. At his sentencing in May of 1995, he said that Vicky's death was a tragic accident and told the court, "I love Vicky." Vicky's family spoke at the sentencing and they were absolutely heartbroken. Her aunt Sandra said, "When you truly love someone, You don't kill. I don't think it's right. He didn't have to kill her. If he didn't do it, why did he have to agree to involuntary manslaughter? And her cousin Matthew also spoke out saying she was robbed of her right to life, her right to a decent funeral, and to let her family say goodbye. He had a lawyer defending his rights. No one was defending Vicky. Years after John tried murdering Teresa, he murdered Vicky. It's so sick, and my heart just breaks for Teresa and for Vicky's loved ones, and it's just so unfair the fact that he only got 2 years for what he did to Teresa, and because of this he was out and about and was able to meet Vicky and killed her. You know, it's just so unfair. After John's friend Frederick learned what happened, he broke all ties with him. He was even supposed to testify for the prosecution, but was unable to because he suffered a brain hemorrhage the year or two before. Now, while John was in prison for murdering Vicky, he told a psychologist that he fantasized about killing the female prosecutor and his female defense attorney, and then fantasized about having sex with their bodies. The two women were notified about this, but have not given any comment about it. John said that those types of fantasies began when he was around 11 years old after an imaginary friend told him about having sex with women's lifeless bodies. It's just, again, so appalling and so disgusting. Now, after all of this, his wife divorced him in 1996 while he was still in prison. He also got his minister credentials online through the Full Gospel Bible College. He said that he had found God in prison and that religion saved him from who he once was. So after that, he spent the rest of his time in prison devoting his life to religion. And in 2007, after serving almost 13 years in prison, he was released. He was back out with the public. He wasn't given probation. He wasn't obligated to tell authorities what he was doing, where he was going, nothing. He was just let back out into society. He moved in with his sister Christina, who said that he seemed like a new man. John told her that he had given himself to the Lord and that his past was behind him. You know, he was a new person. He said that he learned from his mistakes and that he wanted to live a better, more peaceful life. Now, Christina wanted this to be true. She wanted to believe that her brother had actually changed. She wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt and tried to support him as he started over in life. He tried getting back on his feet and finding work as a minister at a local church, but because of his criminal background, he honestly had no luck. While he was looking for a place to work, he was also spending his time online trying to find someone to talk to. That's when he met Sally Jane Kelly, Rebekah Gay's mother. Sally says that it happened on Halloween night when she was just online, feeling lonely and hoping to talk to someone, and that's when she came across John. She was just looking for a companion, and the two hit it off and began a romantic relationship. And as time went on, Sally mentioned that her church, where she taught Sunday school, was actually looking for a new pastor. It was a very small congregation in rural Michigan called Christ Community Fellowship, where pastors often came and went, and sometimes they would go months or even a year without a pastor. Sally thought that John might be the perfect fit for this. So he went to this church and was honest with the congregation about his past. He told them that yes, he had been in prison, but didn't tell them the truth about why he was in prison. He never mentioned that he brutally stabbed 17-year-old Teresa Morris or that he murdered 26-year-old Vicky Sue Wall and had sex with her lifeless body. Instead, he told them that he was once involved with a woman who used drugs, saying that she died from an overdose and that he panicked and ran away. Now, a woman named Donna, one of the church elders, said that in theory, something like that could happen to anyone. Christopher, another member of the church, remembered that John was very open about his past, and since he seemed genuine and his message was strong, the church decided to just give him a second chance. Catherine, another member of the church, said there was no reason not to believe him about his past because he had come clean about everything and was, straightforward with his criminal past. They were thinking, okay, if he admitted that he had gone to prison, why would he lie about the reason why he went to prison? So from then on, every single Sunday, John stood at the podium and thanked the congregation for believing in him, for giving him the chance to do what he said he was called to do, which was to preach. To them, John was a reformed sinner, a success story, living proof that faith could change people. And Sally honestly thought the same. John told her the same story about why he was in prison, and she saw a man who had faced his past, served his time, and was now trying to live right. Christina remembers asking John if he had told Sally the actual truth about his past and that he said yes. But what Christina didn't know was that he told Sally and his new church a completely different and false version about what actually happened. So yeah, that's how John and Sally ended up meeting. They moved in together at the Broomfield Valley Mobile Park home in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, where we know Rebekah eventually moved into as well with Conway in their own house. And there, John was a friendly and polite neighbor, always willing to lend a hand to someone. He would help the neighbors with small projects, with fixing things around their houses or just checking in on them, like when he helped a church member named Kelvin Patterson build a deck. People just described him as like your ideal neighbor and said that he was kind, dependable, and very easy to talk to. So to John, things were going really well for him in his life. He was working at a church. He had found the love of his life, Sally, and was, accepted into this community. He decided that he just wanted to spend the rest of his life with Sally. So John and Sally got engaged after a few years of dating. Sally, was really excited to have John join the family. He had proven himself as a reformed man, and he was really helpful with Rebekah's son. He would babysit him, take him to daycare, or wherever she asked if she was busy or at work. So Sally was like, well, he's basically perfect. He'll make a great addition to the family, and she loved him. However, Rebekah wasn't a fan of him. I know, that was a lot of history about who John was, but basically from the start to the end, of his childhood to his criminal past, to getting married, to having children, to becoming a pastor basically, and to meeting Sally and how he entered Rebekah's life. It's truly frightening to know that this was his past and that Sally, the congregation, the community had no idea what a truly violent person this man was. So yeah, now that we've learned a little bit more about who John was, his background, and again, how he ended up in Rebekah's life, let's get back to the investigation into her disappearance. As investigators were speaking to neighbors, coworkers, and friends when searching for Rebekah, they learned that John had actually made her feel very uncomfortable. They told police that he would often come into her work and just make really weird comments about her, saying things like, "Oh, isn't she so beautiful? I just love her. She's such a beautiful woman," which made Rebekah really uneasy and said that she didn't like the way he talked about her or the way he acted around her or the way he looked at her. According to her boyfriend Aaron, she had recently gotten a perm and her hair was curly now, which he says made John become like kind of obsessed with her. It got to a point of feeling so uncomfortable that she was seriously considering moving out of the mobile home park just to not be close to him. Now, even some people of the church noticed this. Kelvin, one of John's neighbors and church congregants, said that he could tell something was off in the way John interacted with Rebekah. He didn't treat her like a daughter or even like a stepdaughter. It was really different. He treated her more in a way like a man who was interested in her. Kelvin remembers one specific moment when John turned to him and said, "Isn't she a beautiful woman? Wouldn't you love to have that?" Kelvin was shocked to hear him say that and told him, "John, for God's sake, that's your girlfriend's daughter." Kelvin and his wife also said in the recent weeks that John seemed to have been drinking more and the disturbing comments about Rebekah increased. Other neighbors named Barbara and Bill said that they saw John over at Rebekah's house quite a lot. It seemed like he was always there. When police heard all of this, all of these things stood out to them. Police continued questioning people, getting more information. And according to the bar staff members, Janet and Kathy from the barn door, which again is where Rebekah's car was found, John walked into the bar the morning she went missing. Now, Janet was alone at this point, opening up. So she immediately called for Kathy to come out from the back to talk to him because she didn't really like John and didn't just want to deal with him, by herself. So Kathy went over and John started talking right away. He was acting frantic, speaking fast and saying that he was distraught, that he didn't know what was going on and that he hadn't seen Rebekah. As Kathy was speaking to him, she noticed something. The same thing that investigators noticed. John had fresh scratches on him. Now, Kathy tried to calm him down, but something about him just felt off. She said that the whole time he was, talking to her, the hair on the back of her neck stood up. She could just feel that something wasn't right about the situation. So at this point, investigators knew all about John's past, about his criminal record, what those close to Rebekah said about him, that John was the last person to see her, and that John failed his polygraph test. But still, despite having all of this, they still needed proof. They needed proof that he actually had something to do with her disappearance. During his interrogation with Sergeant Patterson, investigators obtained the search warrants for his home and for his truck. And in his home, they found even more disturbing items. They found zip ties, contractor trash bags, and multiple extra small sized women's underwear, the same size as Rebekah's, in his trash. This was very odd and further raised suspicions about him. Back in the interrogation room, he was still saying that he had no idea what actually happened, and Sergeant Patterson begins trying to get him to tell the truth from a different angle. He brings up Sally, Rebekah's mom, and how John had said that he loved her, how she had given him a second chance at life, how she believed in him when so many others wouldn't. Sergeant Patterson told John, "If you really love Sally, the best thing that you can do now is bring Rebekah home." He repeated that message over and over again to John. even adding how Rebekah's body would deteriorate in the cold and wet weather, so finding her as quickly as possible was extremely important. He was hoping that this would be the breakthrough that they needed, but instead, John just completely shut down. He said that he was done talking and he asked for an attorney, and at that point, the interview had to stop. Now, when this all ended, it was now 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, so investigators thought, okay, let's leave him alone for a while with his own thoughts and we'll check back later. It was a long night, so maybe being alone with his own thoughts will get him to confess. And, they were right. John eventually folded and said, okay, I do have information to give you about where Rebekah is, but said that he would agree to tell them if they agreed to his terms. He wanted to make a deal. He said that if he told them what happened, he wanted them to agree that he would get life in prison, separated from other inmates, and that he wanted to have one last call. Investigators agreed to this deal, but he needed to tell them where Rebekah was first, and that's when he started talking. He admitted that for about 2 weeks, he had been having, quote, fantasies about her, saying he wanted to kill her and then have sex with her body. The night before Halloween, he had been watching psycho thriller videos that showed women being murdered, then people performing sexual acts on their bodies. Their lifeless bodies, something that again he said that he had always been intrigued by. That same night, after drinking around 5 25-ounce cans of beer, he claimed that the alcohol gave him the courage to go through with what he had been imagining. He said that at around 2 a.m., while Rebekah and her little boy Conway were asleep in her bedroom, he walked into her trailer through a door that he left unlocked earlier when visiting her. Rebekah was resting peacefully in her bed, just hours away from getting up for work and later taking Conway trick-or-treating. But in the middle of the night, she heard a noise that made her get up to see what it was. When she stepped into the hallway, John was already there. Without hesitation, he hit her in the head with a rubber mallet. He claimed that he couldn't remember how many times he struck her, but he does recall Rebekah turning to him as he was hitting her and saying, "I know who you are." But John continued hitting her until she was unresponsive. He said that he saw she was still breathing and thought to himself, "Oh, I brought zip ties," and proceeded to put a large one around her neck and tightened it as hard as he could. And as Rebekah was fighting for her last breath, he got up and went to sit down and just watched her die. He doesn't remember how long he sat there for, but he later got up when he realized Rebekah had taken her last breath. He then dragged her body into the kitchen where he was going to fulfill his fantasy. He took off all her clothes, but he told investigators that he couldn't get aroused and believes he did not essay her, but thinks he may have just grabbed at her chest. He said it wasn't as exciting as he thought it was going to be, and that afterwards he told himself, "Oh crap, oh well." Yeah, after attacking her and murdering her, he went back to his house and grabbed large contractor bags and then walked back to her trailer to try to clean up the blood, that had soaked into her carpet. Then he put her inside one of the bags and the bloody towels and the mallet in another, carried them out and loaded them into the bed of his pickup truck. He said the bag with the towels and the mallet ripped and some of the things spilled out, which would explain how the blood ended up on the back of his pickup truck. He then drove to a nearby ditch, dragging her body down to the bottom, and just left her there. He then threw away the mallet, the bloody towels, and Rebekah's bloody clothing in a wooded area. After this, he went back to her house and decided to stage the scene to make it look like she had been abducted. He got into her car, which is why the driver's seat was pushed so far back, and drove it to the barn door bar parking lot where he left it backed up into the trees, just enough so that it wouldn't be seen right away. Then John walked back to the mobile home park, threw her pink iPhone, her wallet, and her keys into a dumpster, and then went inside her trailer to just lie down on her couch and sleep until it was time to take Conway to his dad, Chad. Yeah, all of this happened while Conway was still asleep in Rebekah's bedroom, unaware of anything. At around 8:30 a.m., Conway woke John up, full of excitement and ready to go trick-or-treating that day with his mom. John said that he dressed him in his Spider-Man costume, drove him to go meet his dad, and that was that. He then just went back to his house as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just killed that little boy's mom in the same house as him. Now, when people started noticing that Rebekah was missing, he pretended to be worried, and as we mentioned earlier, he even called his church to ask them to all pray for her safe return and for her well-being. It is disgusting and so sick, and it's so evil and so inhumane what this guy did. He also made a false call to the police. According to Isabella County Sheriff Leo, when the search for Rebekah had begun, his office got a call saying that John was lying last seen near Rebekah's home at around 6:50 a.m. on October 31st, but it turns out that that report wasn't from a witness at all. It actually came from John himself. He had called in that tip pretending to be someone else trying to throw investigators off his trail. And now that he admitted that he had made the call and lied to the police, it was just another attempt to cover up his tracks. He then told police exactly where they could find Rebekah's body. So officers headed to the location immediately, and when they arrived, they found her. She was in a ditch on the side of the road, about a mile from the mobile home park. The medical examiner later confirmed that John had in fact essayed her. The abrasions on her body showed that it happened either while she was still alive or shortly after she was killed. After confessing to investigators, they let him call Sally. She recalls answering the phone, and police told her that John wanted to speak with her. When John got on the line, he told her, "I just called to tell you that you are the love of my life, okay? And you're probably not going to see me anymore or hear from me anymore, okay? I love you, and I am so sorry. I can never fix it. Okay. Bye." He then hung up and told investigators he didn't want Sally to ever hear what he had done to her daughter. He said that he knew that he was just a monster. Sheriff Leo said that John didn't really seem remorseful. He seemed more worried about his church finding out about what he did. Which did happen, obviously. The word spread, and when the church heard about what he had done, they were all completely shocked. Donna, one of the members of the church, said that she didn't fully believe what she was hearing at first. She was like, wait, what? Like when the news broke that John might have been involved, she actually defended him. She just couldn't see him as being capable of doing something so horrendous. It wasn't until she actually heard that John confessed that all of this truly sank in, and she was absolutely floored. She couldn't believe that this was the same man who had just called her just days before, asking her and the church to pray for Rebekah, saying the police were, quote, giving him a hard time and that he was all shook up about it. Donna said that realizing the truth about him just made her feel sick, knowing that while everyone was praying for Rebekah's safety, John already knew exactly what he had done. Calvin, another church member that I had mentioned earlier, and actually one of John and Rebekah's neighbors, said that he was dumbfounded after learning that someone he considered a friend did this. He remembered John once telling him right there in his kitchen that he wouldn't have wanted to know him back then because, as John put it, he was, quote, Charles Manson. But when Kelvin and his wife looked him up online, they didn't find anything about his past. All they knew was again what he had told the church, that he gave a girl drugs, that she overdosed while with him, and that he ran away, and that's why he was in prison. But now looking back, Kelvin wished that he had just known the entire truth, because of course he wouldn't have let him live in the trailer park and let alone interact with his children or become a part of this church or become a part of this community. I mean, everyone was just so angry as soon as they found out the truth. They just all felt so betrayed and just heartbroken. This man who gave sermons every single Sunday to their community did something so evil. So with all of this, with all of the evidence, with the confession, with everything, John was arrested on November 1st at around 8 a.m. and charged with open murder and premeditated first-degree murder. The following day, on Friday, November 2nd, 2012, Rebekah's friends and family gathered outside Bullock Creek High School in Midland, where she had graduated back in 2007. By 9 a.m., more than 200 people had confirmed that they would be attending the candlelight vigil that evening. Everyone stood in front of the school holding candles while hearing music play from a nearby car stereo. The vigil was organized by Rebekah's former classmates who said that they wanted to bring the community together to remember and honor her. The superintendent, Charlie, said, quote, "The teachers that have had her are very, very sad. She's a great kid. When we are here, when one of us is hurting, we all hurt." It was really wonderful how so many members of the community showed up to show their support for Rebekah's family through this really tragic time. And they heard all of Rebekah's loved ones share memories and stories about the kind of person that she was. Her 11-year-old niece, Ariana, spoke about the lessons that her Aunt Becca had taught her, saying, quote, "Aunt Becca was a very good role model for me. She taught me not to look at the bad when something bad happens, but to look at the good." One of Aaron's sisters also spoke at the vigil. She said, "I have never seen my brother more happy than when he was with Rebekah. I have never met someone as nice and kind. She had a voice as gentle and soft as an angel." Her voice broke as she talked about how Aaron had recently bought an engagement ring for Rebekah, something she never got to know about, saying, "She didn't know, and it breaks my heart that she'll never see it. We thank our brother for bringing Rebekah into our lives." John took Aaron's future with Rebekah from him. Rebekah was his absolute world, his future, the person that he wanted to build a life with. Aaron's mother, Lisa, said that she still cannot comprehend how someone could be so evil. Rebekah and Aaron had been together for 2 years and had so many plans ahead of them. Every time the news came on about Rebekah's case, Aaron couldn't bear to watch it and he would have to leave the room. He lost the love of his life, and in a way, he lost Conway too. They had grown such a beautiful and just special bond. A few days later, on Tuesday, November 6th, Rebekah's funeral was held. The service was described as a celebration of life in her obituary. The church was filled with family, friends, co-workers, and community members who came to say goodbye and celebrate the beautiful life that Rebekah had lived. And all memorial donations were set aside to help cover final expenses and to also create a trust fund for Conway, ensuring that Rebekah's love and care for her son would continue even after she was gone. He would never get to see his mom again, but Rebekah's family was there for him, and as long as they kept her name and spirit alive, she would always be with her son. Now, her family had to focus on getting justice for Rebekah. In January of 2013, after psychiatric evaluations, John was ruled competent to stand trial. However, in March of 2013, he pled guilty to second-degree murder, which Rebekah's family says saved them from the agony of a full trial. At his sentencing in April, Judge Paul said that he sees no reason for John to ever be released from prison again, to ever set foot in society again, that his actions were beyond comprehension, and that he does not belong in society. Rebekah's friends and family were there, listening to the sentencing and were just heartbroken. They were wearing t-shirts with Rebekah's photo on it, and on the back the t-shirt said, "You will never be forgotten. We love you, Becca Boo." The family also spoke and cried while giving their victim impact statements. One relative said that the heart and the soul of the family, that her little boy Conway was the light of her life, and that she was so focused on building a better future for both of them. Sally was just also asking the big question of why. Why was John free to prey on other women after he was convicted for murdering a woman in 1994 and after brutally stabbing a woman in 1980? It just made no sense to anyone. Why was he ever back on the streets? Because of him being allowed back into society the first 2 times, her daughter was gone. She said that Rebekah was beautiful inside and out and had a genuinely caring personality. She was like a light bulb, lighting up every single room that she walked into, but now she's gone forever, saying, "For 20 excruciating hours, we prayed that Rebekah would come home." Then, when the police showed up at her front door with somber faces, she just knew that her daughter was gone. Sally told John, quote, "She was not yours to take. How dare you? I feel as though I'm living Rebekah's pain. I feel every impact on the back of her head, on my head." Rebekah's sister, Deborah, said that her family hopes that one day there will be a registry for violent offenders and killers like John. She said that if something like this had existed, maybe her sister would still be alive. If they had known about his past, about the woman that he killed in 1994 and the attempted murder charge back in 1980, they would have never let him near any of their family. Isabella County Prosecutor Risa Scully told the court, "Here we are with Mr. White being sentenced yet again for a brutal crime against a female. So there's a pattern of extreme violence against females. The loss for this family makes me feel helpless. We can't bring Rebekah back, but we can make sure that John White is never able to put anyone else at risk." John was ultimately sentenced to serve between 56 and 85 years in prison. As the judge read his sentence, he stood there quietly, showing no emotion at all. His wrists were cuffed to a belly chain, and he just stared ahead, completely detached and expressionless. So that was that. John was sentenced, but John would actually not fulfill his sentence because later that same year, at the end of August, he was found by officers in his jail cell at around 4 a.m. And although there were attempts made to resuscitate him, he died from self-inflicted asphyxiation. He hung himself and he took his own life. Now, remember, John's friend, Frederick, who cut off all ties with him after he murdered Vicky, well, years after that, when John was released from prison in 2007, Frederick actually ran into him in Augusta, Michigan, where he was attending a family event. John told him that he had been forgiven for his sins and was now an ordained minister, but he didn't believe it for a second. He knew that John had gotten away with Vicky's murder, and he did not believe that John was reformed. And he was right because, well, as we know, he went on to murder Rebekah. So, after John took his own life, Frederick said he took the, quote, coward's way out, and said, for a guy that was supposed to be a pastor, he never would have killed anyone if he believed what he was preaching. Years later, John's sister Christina looked back on everything and said that somewhere along the way, her brother took a wrong turn and left behind so much damage that can never be repaired. She said there was an evil in him that she couldn't see before, but now, after everything, she sees it clearly. And she hates him for it. She said that she's even glad that their parents weren't alive to witness what John did because it would have destroyed them. When she saw his mugshot for the first time, she didn't even recognize him. It was like staring at a complete stranger. not her brother. She said that she wishes John had never gotten out of prison after stabbing Teresa back in 1980, because if he had stayed behind bars, then 2 women wouldn't have lost their lives, and maybe more, if there are others he never confessed to. Christina really thought that her brother was a reformed man, but she remembers how to her, John and Rebekah had what looked like a normal father-daughter type relationship. When John got sick with a bad cold, Rebekah would bring him soup, check in on him, or stop by with pizza just to make sure that he was doing okay. And when Rebekah had to work, John often helped her out by taking Conway to daycare or babysitting whenever she needed. So Christina saw them helping each other out, and again, from the outside, it seemed to be a kind and just like supportive family relationship. But looking back, she now realizes that there were signs that his view of Rebekah was not normal. There was one particular moment that really stuck with Christina. This was before Rebekah and Aaron were dating, and Christina said that her brother John called her one night very upset. He said that Rebekah had promised to have a pizza and a movie night with him, but she canceled because she had decided to spend the evening with Conway's father, trying to make amends, and John was furious about this. Christina remembers him saying things like, "I can't believe she did that after all I've done for her. I've done so much for her. I can't believe she'd stand me up like that." Like, he just kept going on and on about it, and Christina thought, like, this is kind of ridiculous. Like, he's kind of acting like a jealous boyfriend. So after that call, she didn't think much of it, but now in hindsight, she realizes that this is when he started becoming obsessed with Rebekah. She also recalled another instance the day Rebekah went missing. John called her and told her that Rebekah was missing and that the police and everyone were out searching for her. Christina said that she had this small bit of hope that maybe Rebekah was just with friends, or something had happened, nothing bad, but also deep down she had a bad feeling. A day or so later, Christina's phone rang again. It was Sally. Through tears, Sally told Christina that Rebekah had been murdered by John. Christina said that her heart shattered hearing those words. She was heartbroken for Rebekah's family and so angry at her brother. She didn't go to John's trial. She refused to have any contact with him. After he was sentenced, Christina received a letter from him in jail, and part of it read, "Dear Chrissy, I wanted to tell you how much I love you, how much I miss you, that I love you dearly, Chrissy, and I do understand how pissed off at me you must be. I know what a disappointment I am to so many people, and I am so sorry. I'm hoping someday we can talk, maybe tell you what truly happened." Christina said that it was the first time that he had ever apologized. It was the first time that he had ever said sorry, but still, she didn't believe it at all. She said that he actually wasn't sorry for what he did, that he was just sorry that he got caught. To her, it sounded like he wanted to tell her another one of his stories, twist things around and make himself to be the victim again. So she never answered the letter and again just cut all ties off with him completely. But John kept trying to call her every single day, sometimes twice a day, but she never accepted the phone calls. In the end, John had no one. And when she finally got the call saying that John had taken his own life in prison, she knew that he was in hell, exactly where he belonged. Christina said telling her story years later was really painful, exhausting, and emotional, but it also gave her a sense of relief and helped her finally let it out instead of keeping it all bottled up. As for John's children, because again, remember, he had a wife and he had children, his youngest son, Gabriel, who was 17 years old at the time of Rebekah's death and born just 4 days after John was arrested for the murder of Vicky, he later spoke publicly about his father. He said that his dad knew he was mentally sick but refused to face it or get any help. In Gabriel's words, he said he knew that he was mentally sick, but he refused to engage it and tell people about it and accept help for it. He was crazy until the end, completely crazy until the end. Gabriel explained that his dad had 2 personalities. One was John, the normal, calm version, and the other was Jimmy, the violent one. He said, quote, "John was a good guy and Jimmy was a bad guy." Most of what Gabriel knew about his dad came from stories his mom Dawn told him. For example, regarding John's first known victim, 17-year-old Teresa Morris, remember how Teresa said that John's wife had put a sheet over her face and told her to just shut up and shut up? Well, Gabriel said that his mom told him that she actually put the sheet over Teresa's body to try to keep her warm and alive until help arrived. However, again, Teresa remembers that in a very different way. Gabriel also told the media that he used to visit his dad in prison during his 12-year sentence, but it was hard to really get to know someone behind bars. And after John was released in 2007, Gabriel lived with him like kind of on and off at his mobile home where John lived with Sally. So he actually got to know both Sally and Rebekah. And looking back now after everything that's come out, he said that he wouldn't be surprised if his dad had killed other women too, and that his father might have actually been a serial killer. It's just insane. I mean, John destroyed so many lives. He stole Rebekah's future in such a cruel and senseless way. Rebekah was so happy. She loved being a mom. She loved her son. She loved her job, and she had dreams of going back to college and continuing to build this beautiful life that she was creating for herself and for her son. But because of John, none of that could happen. Rebekah's mom, Sally, said that she wishes she had known who John really was because maybe her daughter would still be here today. And now there isn't an hour that goes by that she doesn't feel Rebekah's presence with her. As for Rebekah's father, Tom, he passed away around 1 year and 4 months later in March of 2014 at the Tony and Trish house for the care of the terminally ill. His obituary lists Sally as his wife, not ex-wife, so it seems that they were still married at the time. However, I wasn't able to confirm what that situation really was with his health or their marriage when Sally and John met, or if they were just separated, or what the situation truly was. But I just wanted to mention that respectfully, since I know some of you might have been questioning the timeline or things, or where her dad was during this entire situation. Regardless, no parent should outlive their children, but now Rebekah and her father have found each other again. Rebekah's family will never get to see the person that she would have become, and Conway has to grow up without his mom. In the Justice for Rebekah Facebook group, her loved ones wish her a happy birthday and just share really beautiful memories with Rebekah, and her friends share stories with her, and it really warms your heart to hear people continue to speak about her today. One friend wrote, quote, "A couple of months ago, I was in Salvation Army and recognized Conway. I approached him and introduced myself, and I told him he didn't know me, but that I knew his mom. I told him that she was an amazing woman. I told him a couple of stories, and then we went our separate ways. He came back up to me before he left, and he thanked me because most people avoid bringing her up as to not upset him. I just felt like he needed to know that his mom was 1 in a million. Not like he didn't already know that, though. She would be so proud to know that her son is so well-mannered and sweet, just like she was." That was just really beautiful. That really just brought tears to my eyes, You know how Conway gets these small, precious pieces of who his mom was from the people who loved her, and he can carry those stories with him. Again, John just caused so much damage and senseless pain, and I'm so glad that he will never be able to harm anyone else again or ever breathe again. My deepest condolences go out to Rebekah's loved ones. I am so sorry that this happened to her, and I just truly pray that Rebekah is resting peacefully. I know that this case is extremely tragic, and again, it just breaks my heart, but I think it's very important to share. The thought of Rebekah, being killed right there in her very own home when her son was in the other room next door is just something that you can't even fathom or begin to think about. John was just so completely evil, and this is just such an unfair thing. Like, it makes me angry that this continues to happen, and first of all, that he got away with it for so long and was just out and about after committing a horrendous crime time after time. It's not right, and I will be leaving some resources down below that you can talk about with your loved ones about recognizing unsafe behaviors, what to do if someone makes you uncomfortable, and how to stay safe. Your safety and your well-being always matters, and there are resources available. With that, that is all the information I have for today's video. Thank you all so much for being here and for taking the time to listen to Rebekah's story. If you guys want more true crime awareness content, make sure that you are subscribed to my monthly newsletter, True Crime Jackie News. It is 100% free, and I send it out on the first Monday of every single month with case updates, with resources, recommendations, and more. There's also a Q&A section at the end where you can submit a question for me to answer, and overall, like I've said, my goal with this newsletter is for it to be another resource for you to learn, get value, and where we can spread awareness together. The link is below to sign up, and I will see you in next month's issue. If you guys haven't seen my previous video, I will also have it linked down below, and if you guys are ever needing a break from true crime, you guys can head over to my second channel, Mysteries with Jackie, which I will have linked down below. That is my channel where I discuss all things thriller and mystery, and it's all completely fictional movies. I just covered the movie The Hand That Rocked the Cradle, so if you guys haven't checked that out, I will have that link down below. It's a nice distraction if you're cooking or cleaning and just want to hear something fictional in the background. It's a really fun channel, so yeah, I will have that link down below. With all of that being said, thank you guys so much for being here with me every single week. I appreciate all your guys' support. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought about this, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye everyone.